Folks, you're with Tasteless today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about, I guess, confirmation bias would be one of the headings I could give it, but particularly how the news is curated and how we're denied access to plain and clear facts, and we're given the narrative. I think we all know that. We're given the narrative to consume rather than given the information from which we then make our own decision. So by providing the narrative, we're effectively being told what we must and should think about any given topic. And now the globalist project, they're trying to force a new form of government and new social relations and new economic structures on us without our consent. Now, the only places in the world where the people did hitherto have a reasonable choice and where government was accountable, the richest places in the world, which is where the globalists want to have maximum control. They can theoretically, as they see it, control most other parts of the globe if they want, but trying to pass through the various defences that the Western nations have, such as representative democracy, the rule of law, due legal process, independent courts, independent media, and so on. These are all obstacles to globalisation, so they all have to be removed, and they mostly have been so far. Elections are just, unless the globalists control both the candidates or all the major candidates, which they often do, by the way. But if they don't, if someone like a Donald Trump, whatever, gets up, then the globalists are more than happy to rig the election to produce the outcome that they want to make sure the pro-globalist candidates get up. The same could be for judges now in courts. Legal practitioners are openly and brazenly happy to and content and see no problem with making legal decisions and legal judgments on the basis of globalist activism or what will suit the globalist project. Lawyers the same, the proliferation of NGOs, and of course the news is a big part of that. And if you look at the memos and the communications between the Democrat globalist machine in Washington DC, the deep state globalist machine, you look at the communication between them and them going to the bigger social media platforms, and you'll see a term that constantly or frequently comes up, the persuadable public. The persuadable public. They see an urgent need to have 100% curation of the news, so that only what we want to be reported will be reported, and it must be reported in the way we want it reported. So that's the globalist approach. Now you see that with any ideologically based government. Governments that are based not on ideology but are based on the representative democracy, independent courts, all those sorts of things, and independent news, fourth estate. They not that they're not very creative with what they try and get across, though they are. That still happens. And in wartime, propaganda, for example, plays a big role. But outside of that, there's a much freer flow of information. It's not perfect, it's not 100%, but a much freer flow of information. The government is much more accountable. The courts are much more independent. The justice system is much more impartial. The rule of law is applied much more equally than it is in an ideological situation. Now, you can ask, is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but it's much more accountable and much more independent and so on. With ideology, you must control what people think and the way they think it. And therefore, the narrative and 100% curation of the news and what people see is essential. So coming now to the situation in the Western world today, and this could be in Australia, the United States, and so on. The deep state Democrat globalist machine in the United States is acutely sensitive to what may appear on the social media platforms. any influential, particularly if it gets to young people, any influential or influencer, if you like, on that's into politics, is pointing out the questions to do with election integrity or questions to do with whether the climate change propaganda, anything at all that questions this has to be removed or deboosted. Now, as they don't care. Say something that totally exposes climate change myths is around, and it's factual, it's well researched, it's pretty much bulletproof. Then they'll have that. They'll demand, well, can you get this put on page 3 of the search? If you can't cancel it entirely, at least make sure it goes onto page 3, because 95% people will only look at page 1. Then you're up to 99.5% that may go to page 2. By page 3, it's a minuscule proportion of people. This even goes for journalists and other people. They'll go to Wikipedia or something like that, and that'll be the factual basis for their articles. So really, we're at a situation. Again, this is all across the Western world now, where anything that may question the narrative or certainly opposes it has to be deboosted or put on lower ranking or taken off entirely, or the people that make the videos have to be they're completely deplatformed or have their videos cancelled and so on. So this is very much part of the thing. Now this straight away, you don't have to go any further than this. Already you're right in the thick of the ideological warfare. Our ideology won't hold up to scrutiny. We can't support it with facts. We can't support it with accuracy. We can only sustain our narrative if no one else is allowed to speak. So that straight away gives it. Now something goes beyond that. If you look at the examinations that particularly the Jewish writers have of say the rise of Hitler. Now they ignore most of the realities and come at it from a strictly ideological point of view, that if we could have controlled what the German people, because it was a democracy at the time, because if we can control what the German people would think and what they could see and what news they could see, then we could have prevented Hitler from getting elected as Chancellor of Germany. If only we could have controlled that. That's it. That's the thing. So what we need to do is look at the world on the basis of we can control what people think and what they hear and what they see, and that will stop bad things from happening. Now, apart from being an absurd and utterly childish sort of position on things, it's very much a sociology sort of, final year of high school sociology debating team, lesbian type sort of way of thinking. There's not much reality in that. And if we look at the German situation during the rise of the National Socialist Workers' Party, which is what they were, the shorthand was Nazi, but they were the Socialist Workers' Party. They weren't hugely socialist, I guess. They Workers' Party, yeah, you could concede that. But the difference, Germany at the time had a hugely fragmented. They were a new democracy. They hadn't really been a democracy, or they'd been a kind of a constitutional democracy, but more sort of aristocratic than democratic, really, at the time. But after the World War I, they became a democracy, which was forced on them, and it was I thought quite an unwieldy constitution that I think would have created more problems than anything else. But it also created a multiplicity of parties, regional parties like the Socialist Party, the Workers' Party, all sorts of Christian parties, various flavors of democracy type parties. So there was always this multiplicity of parties. So for one party to have anything more than 25-30% of the vote was huge in Germany at the time. And the Nazis got, I think, 44 or 45% at their height of the vote, which was massive at the time. In one party holding that. So there was a huge struggle between communists that were constantly trying to launch uprisings and revolutions, which scared a lot of people. and the other party seemed to be unable to really mount any effective opposition. But the Nazis did. So we'll get rid of these communists, we'll bring stability, we'll bring continuity, and we'll put people back to work and so on. This idea they put everyone to work in armament factories is bullshit, utter and total bullshit. But the look at this Jewish take on the Nazis, if we could have controlled and curated the news. For example, when Hitler had a big political meeting, or he was coming in to visit a city or a town, and going down the main street, and as all politicians do, they go in the open top car and wave to everybody. That's how it happens. So you can't say, well, Hitler was uniquely bad because he did that, because every American president and British prime minister and everybody does it. So it's hardly a unique Hitler thing. But his if the news, all the news networks had not covered Hitler doing that, if there'd been no newsreel footage, if the Nazis weren't allowed to advertise the fact that Hitler was coming into town to do the meet and greet, politician stuff, then the Nazis wouldn't have been popular, and maybe they never would have won the vote, or never would have got a large percentage of the vote, which they did. So if we'd not allowed any of the news stations to cover what Hitler was doing, then he would have got a lesser following, because the way the news networks covered it, then that made Hitler, gave him if you like, a bigger public profile, which would have attracted more votes. Also, the same of the rallies and the public sort of the town hall meetings and town hall speeches that Hitler made. That was how he started out. I mean, Hitler started out going to town hall, making speeches to 3 or 4 people. That was on the beginning, like the early 1920s. That was all that was turning up at the time. It certainly changed later, but this idea of, if we'd just been able to suppress everything, like if the Hitler had done a column for a major national newspaper, if only we'd not allowed him to do that. If only we'd prevented, but we'd allowed everyone else. We allowed the people that we approved of. The Communist Party could still do it because they're good, but the Nazis were bad, so we should stop them from doing it. And so, hold on. It's that ridiculously childish thing. If we stop the bad things, only the good things will remain. Well, what are the good things? What are the bad things? Oh, I don't know. Things I like are good, and things I don't like are no. That's not how it works. Not in the real world. So this idea came up, say, in 2016, where you get the head goons in Google, for example, saying that if only we'd suppressed Trump's media presence, if only we'd suppressed it and deboosted it, and we'd artificially boosted Hillary and artificially deboosted Trump, then Trump may not have won. And so we're really responsible. We should have stopped this because it's the same as Hitler. Now, let's just have a look at this. That if any uncurated news or anything that isn't filtered through our value system is populism, and the people we know now from history that the people will vote for someone like Hitler. So therefore, we have to stop the people from voting. We can't actually stop them from voting physically. We can't sort of shoot them when they turn up to vote or something. Because we can't do that, that's going a bit too far, or it is now. And I can imagine a future where those things are considered. But if we can just stop them from thinking the wrong things, then we can achieve this paradise that is only around the next, like the unicorn is just around the next corner. So populism, which is people making up their own minds based on the facts, that is now populism. It's the same as like working out a gym is now fascism or white supremacy. That's the insanity of the times we live in. So people making up their own minds based on the facts is populism. Populism is fascism. Fascism is Nazism. Nazism is Hitler. So really letting people make up their own mind based on the facts is Hitler. I mean, Hitler is just the next step. Now, this, of course, is ridiculous and absurd. But when you're trying to push an ideology on people, you have to rely almost completely on lies and omission. So if we just don't cover the Donald Trump, or we don't cover people that we don't like, we don't allow them to be seen on television or talked about, or if it is talked about, it's in the most negative, skewed light, and we have to fabricate evidence, or if we have to tell the most ridiculous stories about them, then that's okay, because we're doing good. We're fighting back against populism. And if you fight it back against populism, then you fight fascism, and that means you're fighting Hitler, which means you're doing a good thing. So the idea of if only we boosted Hillary and deboosted Trump, and it would have made all the difference. But wait a minute, what right do you have to do this? Are you an elected representative of the people? No, because the people can't be trusted. They may do something populist. We have to tell them what to think. We have to make sure they think what they're supposed to. That is now that is the neo-democracy of the new era, telling people what they must think. Now, given that we can't precisely control what people think, but we can control what they see and hear and what they're told, and through that engage in at least a certain degree of mind control. But how successful is that? Certainly by my sort of reckoning, the 2016 election campaign, that the entire media establishment was quite hostile to Trump. He got coverage, but it's very negative. And I saw interviews with Kellyanne Conway, Trump's presidential campaign advisor, and they were brutal. Talk about one-sided. That wasn't they were interviews. They were just all out attacks, and I thought she held up sort of rather well in the face of that sort of brutish behaviour by a manifestly partisan news pack or a bunch of reporters. So really, this idea that controlling what people think, how far do you actually take this? Because I saw in 2016, it struck me as really I didn't really know much about Trump, and I didn't think he had much of a chance. I thought it was clear they were the establishment wanted Hillary to win. That was abundantly clear. So I didn't think Trump would win. I thought that the media was so much on Hillary's side that would get her over the line. So I was rather surprised on election day to see that Trump looked like he was going to win. So how far could they have gone in 2016 with news curation? I don't think they could have gone a whole lot further. But the argument was by the folks at Google and other platforms that they could have gone further. They could have been a total shutdown of news, which means it's no longer the news. It's, no longer reporting facts or what's happened or what's occurring. You're actually creating an absolute ideological narrative. And that's where we've got to. So the choices that, as they see it, we have is you either have this totally curated ideological narrative, that where the elite selects what you're allowed to see and hear, and the way you're allowed to see and hear it, and the delivery mechanism and the slant and the bias and so on, and anything else is populism. So you only have that binary choices. They say anything else is populism. Populism is Hitler. So therefore, that's it. You've got what they tell you, or you have Hitler. Those are your choices. And if you're somehow people are allowed to put information outside of the narrative, the curated narrative, then they are Hitler. They must be. What else could they be? They must be Hitler. So this is the absurdity of the times that we're in. And if you look at the 2020 election, the media went to, and the entire mediascape went to astonishing lengths. I mean, absolutely, I couldn't even believe it was happening. I was watching astonishing lengths to deboost Trump and artificially boost Biden, and there's no doubt that had an effect on the voting, but still it wasn't enough. So what drives these people crazy is, in spite of the narrative, in spite of the efforts they go to, the public still is not persuaded, and this irritates the crap out of them. And that's it. Well, they must all be Nazis. That's the only thing. They must all be Hitler. Hitler has cloned himself hundreds of millions of times, and they are all Hitler because they are not buying the bullshit and the lies and the crap that we give them, which means they must be Hitler. Well, what else could it be? There's no other answer. There's no other explanation. It's our way or Hitler. That's it. So they don't seem to realize that, even in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe and so on, no one actually believed the rubbish that they were being told. But they didn't have elections, they didn't have independent courts, they didn't have an independent media, and they had a very brutal secret police regime to enforce the ideology. So if you didn't go along with the ideology, questioned it or spoke against it, then the police would come and arrest you, and you'd be put in prison or sent off to a work camp. You'd be taken out of circulation, in effect, which is what they're doing with the news in the West now. So at the moment, they're taking the news or the facts they don't like out of circulation, so they can't be consumed by the public, or that's their objective. So they're taking that out of circulation. But the next step is they take those people out of circulation. Now they can shut them down and say, make sure they don't have a platform. But the next stage after that, and we're already coming up to this next stage, and we can see that with January 6th, what they're trying to do to Trump, is the next stage is to take the people out of circulation and stick them in prison and or whatever, or even going the next step beyond that. So that's it. So that's how the ideological regimes do it. And now, before that, they started throwing people in prison. The ideological communist regimes realized they couldn't enforce that amount of control without a terror machine to back it up. They had to have the terror machine to back it up. And that's where we're at now in the West, where the elites are realizing, well, we can't persuade the public. No matter what we do, we can't seem to persuade enough of them. We can certainly persuade a lot of them, but not enough of them. There are still tens of millions that doubt. And even after, they seem to persuade enough of them. We can certainly persuade a lot of them, but not enough of them. There are still tens of millions that doubt. And even after that sham of an election in 2020, there was still the news reporters are saying, well, look, 73 million people voted for Trump. They must all be Nazis. They must all be Nazis. Fascist fucking, they're all Hitler. They are, or every single one of them is Hitler. So that was the thing. Now, once you demonize and dehumanize people like that, anyone that disagrees with you is Hitler, then therefore you can go to the very next stage, which is to strip them of all legal rights, imprison them, or take them out back and shoot them. So I think that this is I think this is where we're at now. And it's a terrifying thought that we're heading down this path. But the only way they can get the level of enforcement, enforcement that they seem to think they need, or seem to believe that they need, or that they must force on us to make the ideology of the globalist project work for them in the way that they imagine it should be. The only next step is a terror machine. Now, how they do that terror is the only thing left. I think that's inevitably coming. So how they do that or implement it is going to be the only way. Is it those sci-fi dystopian futures where you've got the walled city where everyone lives well within it, but then you get thrown outside and there are these genetically designed creatures that are there to sort of eat you and tear you limb from limb, and you have to survive out there. But if you're a good person, you can come back inside the walls, those type of things. Is it going to be some sort of dystopia like that? Is it going to be the Siberian work camps as it was in the Soviet Union? Is it going to be solitary confinement until death? Is it going to be taken out back and shot? Yeah, what will it be? But the terror machine is to take you out of circulation, take any disagreeing party out of circulation. That is the next step, because they are irritated to the point of they're beside themselves with annoyance that 73 million people still voted for Trump, and in spite of all the things we did to try and prevent them from thinking for themselves or having independence. In spite of all of that, in spite of all the lies we told them, all the untruths, all the suppression, in spite of all of that, he's still got 73 million votes. Wow, what can we do now? What is the next step for us? And the next step is the terror state. You've been a Tassos today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.